Welcome back to another episode of Life in the West Burbs, where we talk about all things life in the western suburbs of Chicago. And today I got another guest, and my guest today is Zach Hesselbaum, who is going to be discussing power of attorneys, wills, trusts, estate planning, all that fun stuff. Zach, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Ryan. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about yourself, about your law firm, and all that good stuff.
Well, I love your reference to the West Suburbs. Uh, I'm a lifelong resident of the Western Suburbs of Chicago, and it's an area that I love. And I have a lawyer who focuses my practice on helping those in the community. So, primarily through estate planning, tax planning, and elder law. And real estate is a big part of that as well. Our practice, it formerly was known as Law Elder Law. March 1st, we just celebrated our 21st anniversary. So we have a lot of experience helping people in these areas. So our practice is in Aurora. So we're one block west of the outlet malls and the new casino that's being put in here. And what we like to say is we help people and those who love them. So typically, if we're working with someone, it's on something that really matters to them, whether it's helping a loved one avoid the loss of their assets to the nursing home or a home to the nursing home, or helping people protect their assets against probate, taxes, things of that nature.
What is probate? Because I hear this a lot, and I've had some real estate transactions where it's like it has to go through probate, and there's different phases. So, like when someone says the estate's in probate or the house is in probate, what does that mean?
That's a great question. I think it might be helpful if I just kind of lay out how our office approaches estate planning and probate
Yeah.
and those things, and can maybe show you how it's different. But I'll definitely get the definition of probate in there.
Okay.
And I will preface this by saying not all attorneys approach estate planning the same way we do. This is just the manner that we've found works really well for our clients and their families. So where we always start is actually with powers of attorney. Powers of attorney are so important, and we think people often overlook them. They really come in two flavors in Illinois. So there's healthcare power of attorney that allows you to appoint a person to make health decisions for you if you're alive, and that's a key component, but can't make health decisions on your own. So we always start with the health component, and then we go to the property power of attorney, which is a kind of a more legal way of saying financial power of attorney, and that allows someone to handle financial transactions, including real estate transactions, for someone who's alive and can't do them on their own. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're incapable. A lot of times in real estate transactions, limited powers of attorney are created because maybe one spouse can't attend the closing because they're at work or they're out of the country or something like that. But a power of attorney, again, is for someone who is alive but can't make financial decisions on their own. So those become very pivotal as we get older in age and to deal with unexpected things to make sure that we can conduct business even if we're not physically there or sometimes mentally capable of doing that anymore. The hard part, however, with the power of attorney is it's not a document that cures all the issues, because the second you pass away, a power of attorney's authority passes away with you. So when you're gone, the power of attorney is gone. So from there, we a lot of times we'll get people who come to ours and say, "Hey, I really want to get my ducks in a row." Maybe it's I'm a young couple and we're about to go on our first vacation and we have a baby at home. And hey, I want to make sure if something happens to us, the baby's taken care of. Or hey, I've built up some assets. I got this nice new home. I want to make sure it doesn't go through probate, which I'll talk about in a second. So from there, most people say, hey, I need a will. Well, a will is probably the most famous estate planning document you hear in movies and books, the reading of the will. But a lot of times that doesn't actually happen in real life. But a will is kind of an old, in my opinion, archaic way of doing estate planning, because really what that will is, if you have just a will, it's really an admission ticket to the courthouse, whether that be Kendall County, Kane County, DuPage County, Will County. It's an admission ticket to whatever court or house in the county you lived in when you passed away, for your family or a trusted person to go in front of a judge and have a judge oversee the distribution of your assets. And that process is called probate. The reason why most families that I work with don't really like probate is, number one, it's very public. It's a court case. It gets filed in the public record. In Illinois, it takes a minimum of 6 months to handle a full probate case. It's usually longer just because courts are very busy and it takes time to get through, and it's a little bit unpredictable. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are moving away from just a traditional will and that probate process. There are times where probate is helpful. If a family's having a big fight when someone passes away, it's not a bad place to be. It is very methodical and there is a referee there. But if people want really tidy and efficient things, the premier way to do that is through the utilization of a trust. So the most common type of trust is a revocable trust. And what I tell people is a trust is really like a wrapper that's going to put rules around your assets. And if we get your assets in that wrapper, then we don't have to go through probate. The probate is only for things that are not titled in trust, not co-owned with another person, or things that don't have a beneficiary on it. So for the most part, because houses in the northern part of Illinois are quite expensive, if you own a home, even with a mortgage on it, in our office, the recommendation is to do a trust for that, to get it in that wrapper to avoid probate. One thing I wanted to make sure I touched on here with this, there is something in Illinois called a transfer on death instrument, a TODI. Those are ways to transfer your home without probate. They have lots of very technical rules. We have done very few of them, but some attorneys do believe they're an effective tool.
So if so a trust is a way if someone were, to pass away, the trust can, like, court's not required. Like I always kind of had this thought where if, and probably from watching, the movies with everyone sit in this room and here's how the assets are, divided. Court can be avoided altogether if the trust and estate planning is all set up correctly.
Yeah. If you find a trusted attorney that you work with and you work together on an ongoing basis, meaning you work together to establish the trust, which is always the most annoying, tedious part. But if you establish it right on the front end and then work through years to keep it maintained, in most cases, if it's maintained, the court for administration purposes can be avoided. So there are
Okay.
times where family members have differing opinions of how assets should be divided, and sometimes those situations do still have to go to court, but the standard is to avoid court with a trust.
What do you mean by maintain it?
So that's a great question. So a lot of people, a trust is a really powerful, effective tool, and there's lots of places to get trust. You can come to someone like me. Obviously, with the tools that are out there, there are lots of trusts out there, but a trust really isn't worth the paper it's written on unless it's properly maintained. So you have to work to get your assets titled in the trust. By simply creating a trust, it doesn't own anything. So you have to effectively move your house into trust, move your accounts into trust. And then in the years, months, decades to follow, as you open new accounts, you need to make sure that those assets get placed in the trust as well. When then also, depending on whatever your concern is, whether it be avoidance of probate, taxes, loss of a home to long-term care costs, a special needs beneficiary, a beneficiary who has like spendthrift matters. So the things that you can do with a trust are a lot more dynamic in that regard.
You mentioned that kind of trust setup is like a revocable trust. Is there an irrevocable trust? And is that ever used or would be used?
Absolutely. So when you talk to an attorney like me or attorneys that work in this area, saying trust is kind of like saying ice cream. There's a million different flavors of trust, and there's a whole alphabet soup of them if you use the internet to search on them. There's RLTs, idiots, grats, slats. There's all kinds of them, right? So there are irrevocable trusts. That's a powerful tool that sometimes, farm families will use to protect farm ground. Also, if you're worried about protecting assets against loss of long-term care, that's a type of an irrevocable trust is a tool to help protect those assets. And if you have beneficiaries with special needs, using irrevocable trust can become really powerful to protect their benefits that they're getting from other sources.
I want to backtrack a little bit. So you mentioned power of attorneys, wills, trust. Like at what age and at what stage should people enact these things, just as a general rule of thumb?
My rule of thumb that I give people is if you're 18 and you can drive a car, you should have powers of attorney. They're that important. We end up doing a lot of them for college students at our office. So if you have a loved one who's turning 18 or about to go to college, that's a really good time to look at a power of attorney because When they're 18, you can't call their doctor anymore. You can't call their bank for them. So that's a big change for parents out there. And
Is that important then? Because like, if, if something were to happen, an accident or whatever, like that, there has to be that power of attorney to be able to help and make decisions if the person's like unable to. So 18 seems like such a young age to need a power of attorney.
yeah, so a lot of parents of high school age kids, they're used to calling the pediatrician to make an appointment for them or be able to access a bank account for them. When in Illinois, when you turn 18, that's the age of majority. So those things that your parents used to do for you, they can no longer do without express authority. So that's where the power of attorney comes in really handy. I have a great story that I like to tell is I have a friend and his wife, when she was in college, she went off to an overseas study abroad program. And, she had a great time and she called her dad when it was time to come home. And she said, Dad, I'm not coming home. I fell in love. I'm going to stay here in France and hang out with my boyfriend. And he said, that's great. Her dad was pretty savvy and he had her sign those powers of attorney before she went off to France for that summer, and he cleared out her bank account. And after a couple of days, she called and said, "Okay, Dad, I'm ready to come home." So, that so there's really but to deal more directly with your point, yes, if we have a loved one who's in an unexpected accident or suddenly unconscious or something, those powers of attorney are going to allow you to conduct business for them without going to court. That's it. The court in that case is a different type of court case. It's called a guardianship. It's the documents that we put in place for pre-planning purposes are really meant to help us avoid or make the messy court cases and to make things more efficient when we can. And so it's not a prove-all. So again, to get back to your question, what stage, what age? 18 and can drive a car, I highly recommend having both a healthcare power of attorney and a financial power of attorney. What I say is if you have assets that you want to leave to someone specific, so typically when we get married or have a child, you should have a will with that. And if you have assets worth more than $150,000, so even if you have a house with a mortgage on it, so you have life insurance, things like that, in Illinois, that would be the recommendation to have a trust in our office. Not all attorneys approach it the same, but in our office, that's what the recommendation would be. And that $150,000 number is a number I used to say $100,000, and I've been doing this for 20 years almost, and it was $100,000 for my 19 years of doing this. So in August of last year, that number switched to 150,000. So that's an updated number for you.
All right. So 18, power of attorney, a little bit of assets, a will, and then above 150,000 is a trust. So
what I would say is because if you don't have a plan, the state has one for you, and it might be surprising to you what that would be.
And within a trust, like you mentioned a little bit, like you can set it up, right? Like just, speaking from some personal experience and working with you, like we have it like, okay, like here's how we want the money to go to the kids. And like, you can get very detailed and specific on this amount of money and this is how we want it spent, or we want it to this charity. There's really no limits on what you can do. Correct?
Yeah. In custom estate planning, what we like to tell our clients is that if you can say it, we can draft it as long as it's legal. So we're not going to do anything illegal, but that's the beauty of it. You can be as creative as you want to be. So I have some clients who are really, really big on like financial literacy. And they say, okay, if we pass, our kids can have some portion of our money, but they have to meet these certain requirements. So depending on whatever your values are, that may be specific to you. I have clients who like to be very creative. I actually had regarding some personal property, I recently had a client set up like almost a game, almost like a fantasy football type draft for their children to pick out pieces of personal property when they pass. So, I mean, that's one of the things that I really love about my job. While I use some similar tools to help people, it's really solving different riddles on a day-to-day basis for everyone, because everyone's situation is a little different. So, and that's really the fun, what gets me juiced up about coming into work every day.
Kind of an off the wall question. Like you see these like crazy news stories of like, this rich heiress, left her cat, like $1 million, you see, how is that? Because you mentioned you don't do anything illegal. Like how does that become like leaving something to a cat or something crazy like that, actually get approved through the courts and whatnot?
Yeah. So again, like we said, in most cases we're trying to avoid court. So
Yeah.
in our office, I'm very much a transactional attorney. I am not the muscle. My law partners, Diana and Fabiola, they go to court all the time with
Okay.
that. But we do pet trusts because not all families necessarily have a loved person or children. So we
Yeah.
have some people where their pets have become very, very much their most loved things. So the concept of a pet trust is out there. We do them from time to time. So horses, people have horses or several horses that, but we've done pet trusts for that. So there's, people love their dogs and cats, and we a lot of times we'll make little provisions for that. So yes, leaving assets to an animal is something that can be done, but also there's lots of cool other things out there that if it meets your particular needs that you can do it. We've had people leave assets to charities or create foundations or um, all sorts of things like that that are really fun and unique based on the circumstances. Obviously, the most traditional is, hey, I love my spouse. If something happens to me, everything to my spouse. And if something happens to my spouse, everything to my kids. That's the most traditional. But we get to work on really cool things in our office. And those are the things that we get some really fun kind of war stories, for lack of a better word, that you would say, to share with people.
And how long can a trust like see how I want to phrase this. So, at someone's passing, if they have like a long-term plan for, there's a lot of wealth within the trust or whatever, and they have this multi-year plan of who gets it and how they get it, like how long can that be extended or planned out for in future years?
That's a good question. Trusts are very unique in that they can do staging and planning for, the current generation, the next generation, and even generations beyond that.
Oh, wow.
And it really depends on what your personal wishes are. Sometimes it ties to certain tax matters, estate taxes, which are death taxes. And in Illinois, we do have a state estate tax, so sometimes it ties to that. So there's really no limit that really would impact the current generation. In some ways, you asked me kind of a bar exam question here. The trusts are required to comply with what's called the rule against perpetuities, which is a really mouthful legal term. But there is a set period of time where trusts do have to expire or dissolve or disperse in that, but it's a very long period of time. And with that, and I could explain that to people as needed if they wanted to do something very, very long term.
Okay, very good. I thought I had one more question. I'm sure it'll come to me, as we kind of wrap up. But anything else you want to say that people should, be cognizant of or consider, when it comes to this sort of estate planning?
Sure. For me, the biggest thing is from estate planning, tax planning, elder law, just find someone you trust that you feel can give you and your family the guidance that you're looking for, much like when they're looking for a real estate agent. And, having a trusted professional like someone like you, Ryan, I think that's the biggest thing is find people you can trust, people you can work with not only on just a one-time basis, but on an ongoing basis. Because when you can work with people in a real collaborative manner, that's where we see the best results. So whether that's picking out, Ryan from O'Neill Property Group or Zach, the estate planning firm at Aurora, or, this CPA or this financial advisor or whatever it may be, just find someone you can work with and build a team that can all collaborate and work together to really give you, your family, your loved one, your pets, whatever the best result that you could want for the biggest asset. And tying it all kind of together in your world, the reason I like working with people like you, Ryan, is obviously when people purchase a home, it's typically one of the largest purchases that they make in their lifetime. So that's something that needs to be treated with real care. And, you want to make sure you not only get that part completed, but then once you have one of your largest purchases you're ever going to make, you want to put it in the right spot so that it gets to where you want it to go. And we're not cleaning up loose ends or having, to deal with difficult issues down the road. So thank you for inviting me on here today and giving me some
Yeah.
time to talk with you and your viewers about estate planning, tax planning. And again, I'm Zach with Law Hesselbaum in Aurora.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me, Zach. We'll put your contact information below in the description in case you want to reach out to Zach. I'm sure he'd be happy to chat some estate planning with you all. So, Zach, thanks for joining me today.